Life was good. No, it wasn't just good. It was great. Finally, all the hard work was starting to pay off. As a single mother, I was able to support myself and my daughter, Tracy. Life was good. It was so good that as a top producer, my company asked me to represent them at a trade show. How good is that? It meant that I got to go to New York City for 4 days. So I left my new car at home. I just bought a new BMW. I had a new house. Tracy was doing well at school. And I took off for New York City for 4 days. And it was a long, hard 4 days. Worked hard, was in the booth on my feet all day, breakfast meetings, dinner meetings. I was ready to leave the big city and come back to Akron. I said my goodbyes to all the people that I'd worked with, went downstairs and got in line for the taxi cab to take me back to New York City's LaGuardia airport. It had started snowing. It was one of those cold March days, and the snow had started. I saw another sales rep from back home standing in line, waiting for a taxi as well. Her name was Sally Stewart. She said, "Come on, we'll share a taxi back to the airport." So we hopped in the taxi cab, took us to the airport, and we noticed that the snow had really picked up. Now they weren't just little tiny snowflakes. They were big snowflakes, and the wind was getting stronger and stronger. We got out at the airport, went to check in. We realized it was going to be a delay. It was Sunday evening, 5:30 at night, in New York City's busiest airport. So when we checked in, we weren't surprised that the Cleveland-bound flight was delayed. We chatted for a little bit, talked about what a great time we'd had in New York. We knew we'd done a good job. We were both pleased with our career paths. And finally, after a couple delays, we were told we could board. It was now 9 o'clock at night. We boarded the plane together. I went to sit in my assigned seat, and there was a man sitting there. Sally went and sat on the other side of the aircraft, one row behind me, but over on the other side. So the man that was sitting next to her at the window offered to get up and let me sit so that we could continue our conversation. How nice of him, I thought. I sat down, looked out the window, and I said, "Look, Sally, it's snowing even harder." It was pitch black, but you could see the little ice crystals forming on that little teeny tiny window right there. They de-iced us. As soon as they de-iced us, the ice crystals formed again. Surely they're not going to let us take off if it's not safe, we said. At that point, Sally said, "Do you want to change seats with me and sit on the aisle?" I didn't care where I sat. I just wanted to get home. So I moved over to the aisle, and Sally sat out and looked out the window. Pretty soon after that, the pilot came on and said, "We've been cleared for takeoff. We're 8th in line." We waited for a little bit. We knew that was going to take a little while. But pretty soon we were. You could hear the engines roar as we started taxiing down that runway. We lifted 40 feet in the air when the plane started to shudder. It rolled to the left, it rolled to the right, and then we did a severe roll to the left, and the wing was actually ripped off as we hit a storage unit coming down. I was thrown into the icy cold waters around the end of the runway, into Flushing Bay. But I remember hearing the people screaming, preparing to crash is what it was. And I instinctively grabbed one wrist with my other hand, put my head down, and braced. My next recollection is struggling, trying to breathe in water. What am I doing in water? I couldn't get up. Something was holding me down. I was actually pinned, still in my seat, and instead of the seat acting as a flotation device and keeping me up, it was pinning me under the water. I was fortunate enough to be able to unbuckle my seatbelt, I rose to the top of the water, and all I saw were flames. In the pitch black of darkness, the only light that I had were the flames. And as the winds would shift, it would ignite the jet fuel that was on the other part of the water. I pushed the debris away. I pushed the suitcases that were floating, the other seat cushions, just trying to make my way through all this mud and dirt and diesel fuel that was so oily. And what I saw in the distance, though, were the lights of the runway. And I knew if I could get to those lights, I could find someone to help me.
I was about 2 minutes out of headquarters. I was on the highway when I heard the police harbor unit put the job over PD radio that they had witnessed the plane crash and the plane was in the water and it was on fire. The first thought that came to my mind is, I didn't hear right, this can't be. And then when they started screaming again, I said, oh my God, this is it.
What I couldn't believe is that anybody walked away from this plane. You're looking at this and saying, it's unbelievable anybody walked out. And, with that in mind, you say if people walked out, there might still be people alive in here. So you have to give it your 100% and all your effort into doing just that.
When I first got down onto the shoreline, I figured there couldn't be any survivors. The wreckage that I saw and the fire, I just thought it was, I was preparing myself to start stepping over numerous casualties who didn't make it, bodies, and but then I saw these people moving around, so it lifted my spirits greatly, and I felt, well, we can really do some help here now and get these people out.
What happened to USAir Flight 405 on takeoff from LaGuardia Airport last month? Initial investigation reports have placed some blame on the icy conditions on the wings of the Fokker F-28, but the full investigation continues. The Cleveland-bound flight with 51 aboard veered left on takeoff, burst into flames, and landed in the 40-degree waters of Flushing Bay. Port Authority officials, police officers, firefighters, and paramedics raced to the scene to begin rescue efforts. But responders, including air medical helicopters, had difficulty reaching the crash because of the blinding snow, and emergency apparatus got snagged in a massive traffic jam around the airport. First responders said they didn't think anyone could have survived the fireball of the crash and the plane being submerged in Flushing Bay. The thick black smoke made it difficult to see anything. All told, 27 people, including the captain and one flight attendant, died in the crash. 24 survived. Many of those injured in the crash waded through the frigid waters to safe ground as rescuers arrived. Responders said it was almost dreamlike in the way passengers emerged from the wreckage in the darkness of night with snow coming down heavily.
It had been 22 seconds since the wheels lifted off the ground, and now I was in the frigid waters fighting to live. Others weren't as lucky as I was. Sally and the man in my assigned seat both had died. But I had to get out of there. I had to push it away. I had to try to dodge the flames that were all around me like hand grenades being thrown at me and make my way up to the runway. I finally got around the rocks around the shoreline where I clawed my way up those rocks, and I saw a man standing in front of me. And I said, I am so cold. I looked down, most of my clothes had been torn off. And I realized I had a peach bra on. And all I could think of was my mother saying, make sure you wear clean underwear because you never know when you're going to be in a car accident. I thought, well, thank goodness, Mom's will be happy. True. The man yelled for help. I went to yell for help, and I passed out. I'd had burns on my face, my hands, other parts of my body. My critical injury was that I had a collapsed lung. One of my broken ribs had punctured my lung. So besides having only one lung, I'd also breathed in all the smoke, the jet fuel, that greasy, oily smoke was really making it hard for me to breathe. I remember the paramedics wheeling me in on a gurney and me just saying, I'm so cold, I'm so cold, and they would put warm blankets on me. They were slipping and sliding on the ice, too, as I was slipping in and out of consciousness. When I finally did get into the emergency room, the ER doctor said to me, what is your name and what is your phone number? And fortunately, before he stuck me on a ventilator, I was able to give him that information because I had no ID. I had no purse. I had nothing. I hardly had any clothes on. So the ER doctor, after he got my phone number, called my daughter Tracy, who was home alone, and said, we have your mother here and she's alive. I need your father's phone number, not knowing that we were divorced. He called my ex-husband, Paul, and said, I have Kendra here. She's alive. Get the family and get to New York as quickly as you can. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep her alive. Paul, Tracy, and my two brothers, my family, came into New York the following morning, and they were greeted by the doctors who updated them on my critical condition. They were also greeted by a psychologist who wanted to prepare them for what they were going to see. Not only was I on a ventilator and couldn't breathe, but my burns were pretty bad, and I had tubes everywhere. The psychologist also suggested to Paul that he try to keep me calm because they didn't want me getting nervous and having a heart attack at that point. So I see Paul and Tracy coming into my hospital bedside, and I could see the fear in Tracy's eyes. She never, ever expected to see her mother looking like this. And Paul leaned over my bed, and he said, honey, don't worry about a thing. I'll take good care of Tracy. And I thought, oh my God, he thinks I'm going to die. And my next thought was, he doesn't know how to take care of a dog. How is he going to take care of my princess? So when people ask me why I think I lived, I have to recall that story. One day, I was on the ventilator for 3 days, which was actually breathing for me. And then finally, they were able to get me off that when my lungs started to work again. And then in the hospital for a total of 3 weeks because of my burns. One day, the burn unit head, Dr. Goodwin, came in my room and I was crying, and he said, Kendra, what can we do for you? And I said, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. I thought if I could come home, everything would be okay. But that wasn't going to be the case. You see, when that plane crashed, it was like my life was a puzzle, and all those pieces got thrown up in the air. And when they came back down, they weren't going to fit. They just didn't fit. But I came home, and because of family and friends and a community, I was embraced with more love and support than I ever dreamt possible. I had neighbors that put banners in their yards that said, welcome home, we love you. There were dinners that were brought to my house every night. My new routine was going to the doctor's appointments, and I had to be driven by somebody because my hands were too burnt. I couldn't drive. The BMW stayed in the garage, and this independent sales rep had to turn in her high heel shoes for tennis shoes with Velcro. It wasn't exactly what I expected. But the cards and the letters from this community were overwhelming for me. The words of encouragement that they sent me and hope and just love were more than I'd ever dreamt of. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to be back in New York City, and I called the rescue workers at LaGuardia Airport and asked if I could come by and just say thank you. And they were very perplexed by my question because nobody had ever done that for them, which I found a little strange. But I wanted to go back. And I did. We agreed to a time. I was able to meet every single one of them in the room and thank them because somebody saved my life that night. And I told them, I said, because of what you did, your heroic efforts, saving my life in this burning sea of flames is what it was. I said, you have given me this gift. This is all just a gift. Because of you, I've had the opportunity to see my daughter graduate from high school and then college, go on and get married. Now I have 2 little gifts. I have 2 little grandsons. Now if I could only see the Cleveland Browns win a Super Bowl, but we don't need to push that. But you see, life isn't about the fancy car. It's not about the new house. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about people. It's just that simple. It's about people and the connections we make along life's highway and stopping to help each one of them. Life is precious. Life is good. But it's oh so much sweeter today. 22 seconds changed my life. Make your 22 seconds count.